Hi, Lorraine. Welcome to the show. It's really, really nice to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Katie. Pleasure.
I'd love you to begin by maybe explaining to the listeners how would you define the work that you do?
So the two words I use to describe my work are collective dynamics. Collective because I tend to work with teams, whether they're leaders or communities of managers, and I tend to bring as many people as possible in the room. And dynamics because when you get teams to work together on their plans or on their ways of working, on their culture, on their innovation, they get moving and get, forward. So my job is to help companies um, bring dynamics in their collective.
Nice. And you also explained that you're a catalyst for organizational change. And I particularly love a description you wrote, which is about removing the barriers between decision and action. So I'd love to hear some of the most common barriers that show up between decision and action.
Well, it's a very long story. I would say what I see in corporations is oftentimes people who are very skilled and very eager to make things move forward. And they like to do a good job and they like to be, like good students sometimes. We say that in French a lot. What the barriers mostly are located in the way the team can understand or share where they want to go and how they want to do that. So I guess the main barrier would be the vision and the meaning that can be shared or not in a team, especially when the team means different units or different countries or different functions or different levels in the organization. Something might be clear for some of the people and then it's not really understood in the same way or not understood at all in other parts of the organization. So that I guess that would be the main obstacle I see between a decision and action. Another one would be when the roles are not super clear. So it means that maybe some initiatives or tasks or decisions are left with no one knowing really that it is their job to do that, or it was the decision that it would be their job. Other times it's just the opposite. You have several people thinking that that decision should be theirs, and they don't understand why they would have to ask someone else for advice or for a co-decision. So the way to make decision is definitely key. And then you have all those issues about culture, about behaviors, about the way teams communicate, even though we hear that a lot, that we didn't have the information, we didn't have the right information, we didn't have the information on time. So communication is actually key in many organizations to go from decision to action.
A lot of the time it's around the clarity and the communication. So the clarity of the roles and the communication in terms of the vision, but also maybe in terms of the procedures, and a lot
Yeah.
of sort of clashes around that. So what would you do, for example, to help a company that is struggling to have this clarity, cohesion, and communication around a vision, for example?
Well, it's a work in itself. So many of my assignments actually start that way to make sure that the picture is understood by everyone involved in it, and that's how they share where they are and where they want to go. So I often say, as many people in the room as fast as possible is the best way to create a vision that can really have enough meaning for people to realize that what they do on a daily basis is actually contributing to that vision. And so it makes sense for them. Even if a day-to-day task or responsibility might not always be fun or impactful, they know that in the long run they contribute to something that is bigger than themselves. So I guess workshops with leaders and managers and teams, depending on the organization, are really key to create that vision together. And then it's interesting because you mentioned clarity on the tools, the processes, the way to get there. And the image I often take with my client is the image I often use is that the leaders start with the vision where they want to take the organization in the long run, like after a number of years. It can be also how the organization got started and the foundations, why someone someday decided to create that organization that might have started with only a few people a number of years ago. And that's the job of the leaders in most organizations. And then the image I use is that they turn almost physically, they turn towards the managers to say, okay, this is where we want to go, and we make sure that it's shared and that we understand what we want to do together. But then the teams know better than anyone how they can actually achieve what is that vision.
And so what have you found as some of the results once the vision is cleared and once that it's shared with the teams?
Well, the main reason is that if you ask someone to be part of a decision or of a conversation to actually drive the direction toward which the organization is going to go, as soon as you listen to what they have to say and they feel like they have a word to say, they're already part of what's going to happen next. That's why I often say that the more people, the earlier, the better. Because if you look around you, if you ask anyone, it's true, I guess, in our daily life as well. If you ask anyone to be part of a decision, then when it is actually done and there is an agreement and we know what we want to do, what is the intention, what is the vision, then you don't even need to ask those people to act. Like, they take action right away. And that's what I call removing the barriers between decision and action. If you involve people in the decision that they will have to implement, you don't even have to ask. They will just actually implement the decision at their level.
So being directly involved makes them more aligned, makes them more motivated, and maybe also more engaged in their daily tasks and activities.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think that I hear a lot of work on engagement. I think that is something I cannot provide. It is something that people provide for themselves. So what we can do, organizations and consultants like us, is to create the conditions for engagement. And
Yes,
that's one way of doing it.
Yes, the engagement comes as a consequence, as a result of the work
Exactly.
that has been done. You mentioned earlier different cultures and different teams. I'm wondering, how do you deal with sort of cross-cultural differences if it's a multinational company, for example?
Well, the nice thing, the reason why I like to work with multicultural companies is that there is almost never a right or wrong. There is almost never the right answer and the others are not the right answer. It's a combination of many different talents, ways of seeing the world, skills. And so the way to deal with that is to bring all that together. And what I like very much is not only to bring that together and to value what everyone has to bring, which is true in any group and organization. It's especially true when the culture of the different countries come in line, but it's true with every group. And so we realize how people do things, how they speak, what they like to talk about, the way they behave, the way they convey excitement or whatever, when they're worried, when they're angry, how they communicate. And so we bring all that together. And then when you realize, I think it's key to human communication, actually, when you realize that other people don't do things the same way you do them, then you can actually start thinking about other ways of behaving, speaking, and doing things. And then the best is actually when you have a chance to take the best of all those differences and see how the group can actually build on everyone's strength and do the most, make the most of what is available in the organization.
That involves a lot of open-mindedness to be willing to accept, to change the behavior, to adapt to other people's behaviors.
Yeah, sometimes it's very uncomfortable. And it's true for the consultants as well. Actually, it can be true for me when I deal with a client that comes from another country and they have different ways of doing what I usually do in a certain way, and then I have to learn a new way. So sometimes it's uncomfortable for them or for me or for us. Uh, Oftentimes, I think more often it can be actually fun. For me, it's like an adventure. It's like going to a country you've never been to before, or going to try some activity that you never tried before. So it can be sometimes a bit uncomfortable, and sometimes a lot of fun.
I'm glad that it also involves some fun. I mean, I feel that our work is only worthwhile if we enjoy it, at least most of the time.
Yes, yeah, true. Well, I guess the Strength Finder, questionnaire and work, and I am definitely a learner. So when I meet someone or some place or some activity that is new, it's not always true, but for me, it's more a chance to learn something new. And when it involves people, connection, and doing something together, yeah, for me, it's more fun than uncomfortable.
Yes, well, I'm like you, I'm a learner. So any opportunity, any new person, any
Right?
new project always stimulates my curiosity and drives me to, yes, learn, discover, feel excited about my work.
Exactly. And then we try to bring that to the teams we work with. And I definitely see, it's not even I believe, it's really I see that when we feel happy to have a chance to do something different and discover and say, okay, we'll test and we'll try and we'll see how that goes, and we'll see what we have to adjust, including when we talk to someone new and there is a cultural difference. I think that if they see that it's going to be fun for us to try that and to be ready to not know and to make mistakes, I guess they see that it's a path that they can actually take with us, and so they feel a bit more comfortable doing that.
Mhm.
They'll
Well, the
gain the
energy is
excitement.
always transferable. So if you feel excited, then they probably feel the same way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What would you say some of the fundamental pillars of company culture as a whole?
Oh, that's a huge question, Katie.
The main ones, if you had to dumb it down for people who weren't familiar with company culture.
Well, I would say one way of I hear oftentimes when I work with clients on culture, the first thing I'd like to say is oftentimes it's not why they ask for our services. So it's more, they come with an issue or an ambition. Obviously we have clients who come with things that are not problems. Maybe starting a new team, starting a new project, bringing teams together, and they want to get started, properly. And so when they come with an ambition or a problem to solve, they do not necessarily say, okay, I would also like to work on or to solve cultural issues. It is more something that we bring as one aspect of what we're going to do together. So obviously you're going to work on, for example, if I take the example of a team that is being created, so they want to work on what they're going to do together, what is their ambition, their vision, and how they're going to see who does what, and I don't know, they're going to have a schedule, a calendar. Um, they 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 might not necessarily think about the cultural aspect right off the bat, but then we bring it into the mix. And so one way of seeing it is oftentimes people tell me, I don't know really about the culture of my organization. The thing I know is that there are things we do in a certain way, or there are values you don't necessarily have worked on it, on those values on them, but you can see them every day if you talk to anyone in the organization. So oftentimes I hear, well, culture is something that we don't decide and we don't see. So I guess the first pillar would be to realize together what that culture is. A very easy example is to realize if you imagine the culture of a startup in Silicon Valley and you try to bring that to a car company that was created 100 years ago, it's easy to imagine that it might not work super well. So it means that there is something in the way people behave, in what they're trying to achieve, and what they believe, and how they got started as a company that is there. So I guess the first pillar is to realize that culture. And then, yeah, obviously the foundation of the company is a story that drives a lot of actions, I think, throughout the years. If I think about my clients or organizations I've heard about, read about, or talked to. So the initial story is important, and what they're trying to achieve, their vision, I think, is key in the culture of the company. That also drives a lot of aspects. And then in between what is conscious and unconscious in the culture of the company is the values, obviously, values, principles, what they're trying to be in the world around them.
Yes, the vision and the values are sort of the directing compass to help the company grow or maybe make decisions. And where do you feel that companies struggle when they want to define, for instance, their vision or be more clear about their values?
That's a good question. I would say, well, if we talk about values, especially in places where they haven't worked on them much previously, there is always this tension of, is it the values that we would like to be able to talk about, and it's what we would like to be, who we would like to be, or is it the values that we actually can feel? Like if you ask people, or if you look at the way things are done or said in the company, you realize, I don't know, that well, I might not take one specific example because there's so many of them, but you might realize that there are things that are obvious. So I think the tension between, is it values that we have actually identified and we acknowledge that that's the way we do things, or is it something that is more of a communications vibe? You know, it's something that we would like to be. It sounds good. We can have posters in the office, but then if you ask anyone in a corridor or in a meeting what's on the poster, they have absolutely no idea. So I guess that's a big tension I see.
Yes, the sort of decoration aspect of the values rather than the practical ones. I was wondering right now if you've seen a great correlation between the personal values of the founder, for instance, or the CEO or the main people in charge, and the professional values of the company and the business.
I would tend to say yes, definitely. I think I've been thinking a lot about that. I think if you talk, if the leader is still a founder, it's definitely a yes. Because I think that when I see, you know, all those stories about leaders with a vision and a way to lead that is looking forward rather than looking backwards, if I may judge leadership styles, it's obvious that they started with an intention. You know, they might not have started saying, I'm going to build the best company in the world. I don't know that many people have had that idea when they started. They started to solve an issue, to fill a gap, to do things differently. And I guess their values and the story of the company and the way to do things. And as you said, it can be a decision about buying a new company or opening a subsidiary in a new country. I think that the values of the founder are just mixed with everything that is being done in the company. And I guess it's also why people want to join that company. So it's definitely a yes. Then when you are facing a company with like decades since the founder actually started that company, it can be a different story. And I think that it is definitely a very powerful tool. And it's hard to say values are a tool. They shouldn't be in themselves. But still, I use that word because I think that the values of the leaders are definitely key to bringing people on board, on making sense of what they do daily and why they were hired. So yeah, I think it's definitely key.
I've been asking myself that because I was working on my own values, and originally I recognized that probably I had actually only written down my personal values, and I started to think, was there a gap, and were there some values that were very important to me in the professional area or for my business or the clients I work with, but what didn't matter as much for me in my personal life. So I started digging and reflecting on values within the business context. What I have found, though, in my case, obviously I have my own business and it's me and my assistant and then working with clients, so it's not a huge team. But what I have found in my case is that all my personal values are in my business. So I was more trying to think of a business value that maybe I didn't have as much, maybe something around efficiency or structure or planning, that maybe my personal life was more flexible and open, but at work I liked it done a certain way. I haven't finished reflecting on it though.
It's a very interesting question. I think that what you're saying, it makes me think of that concept of wholeness that Frédéric Laloux has talked about in his book about reinventing organizations. And for me, well, if it's your business, I would say I tend to be the same person at work and at home. I guess it's my personality, my culture. I don't know. I don't see how I could not be the same person. That being said, I know that for many people and many years and many places, it is just a different person. Obviously not, it's not Jekyll and Hyde, but it's there are things in your personal life that you shouldn't show at work, and so obviously values that you need to keep for yourself. So yeah, that's what it makes me think about, and I think it's nice when you have a chance to have a job where you can actually live your personal values without thinking too much. Is it more the personal or is it the professional that is at play? So that's one thing that I think you're lucky if you can if you can have your personal values in your business. And then in a larger organization, I was thinking about that earlier today before our conversation. I think that obviously if you ask 10,000 people what their personal values are and what values they would like to be able to live at work, you will not have 10,000 different answers, but the combination will be different. And so what if someone has very important values in life that are not the ones that the entire organization recognizes as their main values? I think I don't know, I guess there can be there can be a way for the organization to have, like, I would say 3 or 4, because I think if you have more, it's not clear and people don't really connect or cannot really connect with more than a few values. I guess if they have values that are different from the main ones that the company has chosen, there is still room for them to be who they are at work. And I guess there might be a connection between their main values and those of the organization. That's a true question.
The coherence between the personal values of people at work and the values of the company. I feel that as long as they feel quite aligned with the company values, even if they have separate ones that are extra elements, if they feel they are accepted with these values and they feel that these 3 or 4 values of the company resonate with them, then it's not too much of a clash. I feel the clash only happens if they have opposite personal values. So if they have additional ones, that's okay. But if it's opposite, then there's a clash.
Yeah, I think there is more of a clash. I totally agree with what you just said. I think there is more of a clash when I can imagine or remember more of a clash when a value is said to be important in the company and it creates expectations, or it creates a beginning of a connection or a similarity, and people can identify to that value, and then it is not really there. So it's talked about and it's supposed to be there, but it's not. That for me is a much bigger clash with much more consequences.
Yes, that would be as if the company says equality, for example, and then they realize that there's a lack of equality between different people in the company, or if they say freedom, but then they're micromanaging or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's much worse.
Yes, because that would create a lot of expectations with all the people in the company. And yes, and if they joined in the first place because they felt it was aligned with these key values, then they'll be even more frustrated. It's a bit like a fake, false advertising. So this
Exactly.
is what
Yeah.
you say you promote, but you're not doing it.
Yeah. And it's fake advertising on something that drives, I guess, I was going to say most of us, but I think every one of us actually, like, the values that you can actually live by at work and at home. I think that's something that is very important for all of us. So I guess if you feel like you've been lied to, or or there is deception, it probably disengages people a lot.
Hmm.
Well, I should take the word probably out of that sentence, actually. 'Cause I've seen and heard so many stories of people who were disappointed by the values that were important to them and they didn't find them, actually.
Yes.
Which is sad.
And what do you feel, on the contrary, then contributes to empowering cultures compared to maybe these types of clashes that we were discussing?
What I've seen, especially recently, I think that we were talking about the vision earlier, and one of the reasons why it is so important is that it creates, it makes sense of what we do. So meaning at work, we've all heard those studies in the last few months, and we're going to start in years, speaking in years. The pandemic has created questions for people who, I don't know, didn't have them before. And so the idea of finding meaning in what we do has become really, really paramount. And so yeah, I think that's the key to engagement, and also and it's also something that has been accelerated recently, is the ability to do. It sounds silly, but for people to do what they have to do. Like we see so many people being hired to do a job, and as you said, micromanagement is um, still a trend in some places. And so maybe even more when things are not going as well as expected, or if things are, turning for the worse. Um, then micromanagement stops people from doing what they have to do. And I think, on the contrary, to answer your question, being able to make decisions, take initiatives, have ideas, and try them freely is definitely a great, great, great booster in teams.
It feels from what you're saying that the coherence and the alignment creates that meaning. And from the meaning, then the cultures are empowered and then the performance goes up.
Yeah, it's well, I'm not sure about the sequence actually, because I think meaning is part of the culture, maybe. I don't know. Maybe. But yeah, definitely it's all connected. Yes, very much so. I think that this idea, I think that what makes people tick is when they see that their action has an impact. And it has an impact if it contributes to moving the team and the project and the organization forward. So I hear so many stories when I ask my clients what they're proud of, or to talk about what they have achieved in the last few weeks or months, depending on the moment and the reason why we get together. They talk some, I mean, at least half and even more of what they say is about their team, whether it's, I don't know, it's a young person who was in an internship and was offered a job, or it's a team that managed to get out of a situation that seemed to be unsolvable. I don't know if that's an English word. So yeah, getting teams and people to do what they have to do is definitely a source of pride for many managers and leaders. And I can understand that. We have the same feeling. I say we, because I guess you'd say yes. When we see that our clients can achieve something because we help them, definitely it's super exciting.
Yes, I think that reminds me that maybe we all get more meaning and purpose when it's involved with other people.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And I discovered recently, I was getting ready for an assignment with a client. It's one of the way empathy works, actually. Did you know that? Like if you feel an emotion with someone you care about, the emotion is stronger, whether it's bad or good, actually. So if you're on your own feeling that emotion, it's going to be lower. So I find that fascinating. And I think that that connects to what you're saying. Yeah.
Yes, I feel it's also equally important. So it makes sense that that would be what adds meaning. And I like what you said beforehand about the meaning goes with the culture originally. So the coherence, alignment, and meaning all together. What I think I meant by that is that once you have more clarity maybe around these things, it adds meaning. So maybe meaning is
Yes.
like at the beginning, defining the meaning and the why and the purpose of the vision, but also all of this then adds more meaning to your daily work or life. I think that's what I meant by the sequence part.
Yeah. That's totally true. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Lorraine, we're already approaching the last few minutes of today's episode. Yes, it flies by every time. This means I have great guests every time because I always think it's gone by
this is fun.
incredibly fast. What would you recommend to listeners, maybe leaders of an organization, if they want to start working maybe on their culture, if they want to start empowering their teams? What would be your last sort of recommendation?
So that's the question I was about to say. I didn't expect, not that it's a crazy question, but just because I just want to say I didn't work on what will I say when Katie asked me that question. I didn't know you would ask me that question. And I'm saying this because from what I've seen in the few months, or weeks going to the end of 2021, I would recommend that organizations focus on what is the best place where leaders, managers, teams, everyone can actually make a difference, and that they don't spend too much time and energy and money, obviously, doing things that others could do with them or for them. Obviously, among those people are consultants, which is why I wanted to say I didn't know that question would come up. But I'm saying that because I think that sometimes I see organizations focusing on topics or actions that if you don't do them very often, you might need guidance. You might need references. You might need, stories of other companies who have done the same thing before you. You might need to talk to leaders and see how they manage their own leadership. And that's what we do. We spend so much time being always ahead of our clients so that we can help them and providing them with other examples, like governance models. I've been working on that a lot this year. So we know the models, we know the examples, we know the people, and we can bring that to them. If they try to do things on their own, they might manage, obviously. I'm pretty sure that it's going to take more time. They might not go as fast and as far as they could if they got help. Plus, while some teams or people are focusing on trying to keep up with what consultants could do, they are not doing what only they can do in the organizations that consultants cannot do. I'm hoping. I hope this is clear. So I'm just saying, focus where you can have an impact and get help where you cannot.
Yes, love it. Fantastic advice. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Lorraine. I love that conversation.
It was a lot of fun, and it's the 30 minutes just went by super fast. So I was really happy to have that chat with you, and I hope it's useful to your listeners, of course.
Thank you. Thank you so much.